Well, good day to everyone joining us and welcome to today's X Talks webinar. Today's talk is entitled Ensuring Data Integrity in Manufacturing, a Customer Perspective on Analytical Instruments and Osmometers. My name is Samaya and it's my pleasure to be your X Talks host for today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes. This presentation includes a Q&A session with our speakers. This webinar is designed to be interactive and webinars work best when you're involved. So please feel free to submit questions and comments for our speakers throughout the presentation using the questions chat box, and we'll attend to your questions during the Q&A session. This chat box is located in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. If you require any assistance, you can contact me at any time by sending a message using this chat panel. I'd also like to welcome our attendees viewing this presentation from our LinkedIn Live event, and I encourage you to submit questions as well via the comments tab. At this time, all participants are in listen-only mode. Please note that this event will be recorded and made available for streaming for those registered on xtalks.com. At this point, I'd like to thank Advanced Instruments who developed the content for this presentation. Advanced Instruments is a global company offering a novel portfolio of analytical tools, including OsmoTECH, a robust line of microosmometers to support bioprocessing and quality control. Solentum, a portfolio of best-in-class imaging and single-cell deposition technologies for single-line development workflows and assurance of clonality. And Artel, a portfolio including leading analytical instruments, software, and services that validate, automate, and calibrate critical liquid handling processes. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today's event. And our first speaker is Shweta Nair. Shweta Nair is the director of the Biopharma Osmometer portfolio at Advanced Instruments, bringing over a decade of experience in the biopharma and life sciences industries. Since 2019, she has led the development and launch of innovative osmometer products, focusing on improving accuracy, reliability, and data integrity in osmolality testing. She stays actively engaged with industry experts, regulatory bodies, and associations to keep up with evolving standards and best practices. Before joining Advanced Instruments, Shweta was a global product manager at MilliporeSigma, where she managed lab equipment for biopharma and research applications. Our next speaker is Sachin Patel. Sachin Patel is the Associate Director of QC Systems at Biogen. His team oversees the lifecycle management and maintenance activities for several analytical instrument and equipment systems across global quality control and manufacturing areas. Over his 20-plus year career in the pharma and biotech space, he has grown fond of using technology and sound problem-solving skills to support resolution for compliance gaps across business areas. So now, without further ado, I'd like to pass control to our speakers. So Shweta, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Samaya, for that kind introduction, and hello, everyone. Again, my name is Shweta, and I'm excited to speak to all of you about the OsmoTECH portfolio of osmometers that are specifically designed for the biopharma customers. Give you an insight into this portfolio, taking into account the criticality of the osmolality test, as well as understanding the data integrity and the compliance environments that these instruments will be used in at our customer sites. To kick off, I want to take a moment to give a brief introduction to Advanced Instruments for those of you who may not be familiar with us. Advanced Instruments has been around for over 65 years now, really focused on leading osmolality testing solutions, as well as expertise in cell line development technology and liquid handling quality assurance. We support customers in over 90 countries across the world, whether it be North America, EMEA, or the Asia Pacific region. We're really focused on developing technologies in close partnership with our customers to streamline their workflows and ensure that they have confidence in the results to help them do their work better. With that, within our Advanced Instruments company portfolio serving the biopharmaceutical space, there are 4 specific product lines. We have the OsmoTECH product line, which is our osmometer portfolio that serves the biopharma market and really focused on testing of osmolality. We then have the Solentum instruments and reagents for the cell line development workflow, the Anoximab jar, anaerobic jar system for bacterial cultivation, and the RTL instruments for pipette and automated liquid handling calibration. All of these products are really supported by our very own dedicated team of service as well as applications team to ensure that we're meeting all of the requirements and supporting the quickest implementation of these technologies in your workflow and preventing any disruption. Now, the OsmoTECH portfolio of osmometers, they were specifically designed with close collaboration with our customers in the biopharma market to try and understand and optimize the testing of their various biological samples, whether it be cell culture media, buffers, or even final drug product, and ensuring that they are meeting the regulatory requirements, both for the osmolality test in itself, as well as the nature of environment and ecosystem in which these instruments will be used from a compliance and data integrity perspective. Now, focusing in on the OsmoTECH osmometers, I want to spend some time discussing the application of osmolality testing in biological development and manufacturing process. So starting from cell line development all the way through to cell culture scale-up, osmolality can be used to confirm the concentration of your media, your feed, and really gain insight into optimize that scale-up step. Really make sure, are your cells happy and are they the right optimum environment for production of your desired protein? In downstream purification workflows, osmolality is used to confirm your buffer concentrations, help ensure your buffer exchange process, and measure the concentration of your drug substance. And finally, in formulation, all the way from development through fill and finish, osmolality is a critical quality attribute that provides valuable information about the identity, the safety, the purity, and the stability of your drug product. For injectable drug products, the osmolality of the solution must be in the physiological range, or it must be close to the osmolality of your blood, since a higher or lower osmolality can cause pain at the injection site by creating a hypertonic or hypotonic solution. Now that I've introduced the different use cases for osmolality, I really want you to understand that various processes in this, right? Maybe in process development, maybe happening in clinical manufacturing or commercial manufacturing. And all of these are at varying levels of regulatory requirements, varying level of compliance, and maybe even data integrity requirements. And it's critical as a vendor, as a provider for this equipment, we really understand what the customer needs are beyond just the test and the importance of the performance of osmolality testing. So that selection process of what a customer goes through in choosing of a new osmometer for your lab, there are various features and considerations that will go in. The ease of use, the performance, maybe the volume requirement, the amount of test time, the data management, and the regulatory compliance. Now, none of this is really listed in a particular order of priority, and I'm pretty sure this is not a holistic list either. But what I really want to highlight is that this process isn't simple, and the instrument's accuracy and reliability is just one of the parameters. At the end, you're looking for an instrument that fits your workflow holistically, and how efficiently you can use the data from that parameter or from that device to make your decision at the end of the day for your work. And that's really where the genesis and the design and the approach for the OsmoTECH portfolio is really centered on. So the OsmoTECH portfolio of microosmometers are really designed for laboratories that are seeking that compliance, seeking the reliable performance, but also having the flexibility to meet your other aspects from security or data integrity or even flexibility of data management for your workflow. Now, the osmometers were designed in close collaborations with customers and really seeking their feedback. And what you'll notice here is there's 3 different models that are available: the OsmoTECH XT, the OsmoTECH Pro, and the OsmoTECH HT. Very quickly, if you notice the distinctions between the 3, they're designed for varying levels of throughput of testing, because we understand that at early phases versus compared to maybe the later phases, the number of tests, so the volume of tests, can vary to get you to a confident position to make a decision, and to have that flexibility in both the testing throughput as well as your testing format is where the design of these instruments are. The testing process is a very fast and simple process that really integrates into the customer's workflow. But as you can notice, the 4 boxes, the ease of use, the reliable and superior performances are key aspects and key features of our device that really benefits and resonate with our customers. And then the last 2 are the areas that I think are becoming more and more critical in the decision-making process for which device or which analytical instrument you bring into the lab, is the ability for it to have robust data compliance and the flexibility for the data management, given that there are so many different ways each customer may choose to manage their data, given the wide variety of analytical devices, wide variety of infrastructure in which they may have or that they may be moving towards as they are looking towards that compliance environment. So a lot of the features from the data management and the data compliance side are adjustable in the design of these instruments to really support the lab's specific needs and offer them flexibility, whether they be in early discovery to process development to manufacturing, whether they're in their early phase or the very first steps into the journey into getting a paperless environment and a fully electronic environment for their data management. The instrument will be able to support all of that effort. And this is the key space that I think we collaborate and we really work closely with our partners. We at Advanced Instruments see ourselves as a compliance partner. Our osmometers really enable any lab to meet, to support, to really check the boxes for 21 CFR Part 11 or EU Annex 11 when it comes to requirements around data integrity and data compliance. And in this partnership approach, we are in a position of seeking feedback, but also providing support when needed to customers to enable that these instruments are meeting their requirements and supporting them through their life, through the journey of data integrity on their site. With that, I really do want to introduce you to one such partner, a dear customer of ours, and who we've worked very closely with, ensuring that their data integrity journey, their data integrity requirements are met, and we as a vendor are able to support that holistically, is Sachin from Biogen. So I'm excited to have you hear directly from Sachin about his experience and how he looks at data integrity in this space. Thank you, and handing over to Sachin.
Thank you, Shweta, for the warm introduction. I really appreciate the opportunity to present our perspective on data integrity. So just want to give a little bit of background about myself. So I've been in the biotech space for over 20 years. I started my career in process development as a young engineer, and I really appreciated this phase of my career because I was able to help solve problems without much restriction as we supported the evaluation of process technology in non-GMP setting. But it wasn't until I moved our development work into the next stage that I started to observe the GMP world in action. And this was quite an adjustment for me. I can still remember it like it was yesterday. Our team had completed their first mock batch record review, and that was an eye-opening experience. The number of GDP flags that were in that binder was incredible, but it was a good learning experience. It really helped me move into the validation space, especially in a GMP area. And it has been super helpful for me as I moved into many of my CQV projects, new laboratory startups, laboratory relocations, data integrity remediation, and then general PC and software replacement activities. And so for the rest of the presentation, I'll talk a little bit about what life was like pre-data integrity, and then what went into our data integrity remediation from a high level, and then kind of what's the future look like for data integrity and how we approach it. So the past, which I like to call the good old days. Inspections were very straightforward. When I look back at it, we had three main areas. You had the business, you had validation, and you had IT. And so the business, they spoke about method transfers and validation. They would talk about the assay and the testing associated with it when you look at the procedure. Are the individuals that are running the assay, are they trained? Are they trained on GDP? Then we had the instrument validation side of it, where inspectors would come in and say, hey, show me how you did the validation on this particular system. And we would come in and show our validation protocols, our user requirements, the Part 11 work that was done on that particular piece of equipment. We would hand them the IQ, OQ, PQ protocols, which were more than likely paper back then. So it was very easy. You just went through the protocol and that was it. And they would ask, hey, what's your official record? And at the time, it's paper. Or we had just started moving things into LIMS. And that was kind of open shut when it came to validation. And then IT, they would ask questions about enterprise applications. Show me your CSV documentation. Do you have LIMS? What's your LIMS interface look like? Did you do testing? What are your requirements? As you can see in this picture, we all lived in the same neighborhood, but we each had our own home. So validation had its own home, business had their own home, and IT had their own home. And we rarely had to work together other than ensuring that our systems get up and running. But we were individual quality management systems. But then we started to see a changing of the tides. Inspectors started to ask different questions. They would come in and they'd ask about application capabilities. They would ask questions about system administration. And they were very data focused. So it's something that we really hadn't seen in the past. One particular question is, can you show me your application? And so it went away from where they were observing an analyst use an application to do their testing, to having an analyst walk through the application, asking them questions. Hey, what does this do? What does that do? And that was very unique because users weren't used to that type of questioning. The next question was, who are your system administrators? It used to be, hey, IT managed that. Well, they wanted to ask a little bit deeper, which IT members? How are you ensuring that IT member doesn't have any interest in the data? Are those roles segregated? Then it was, hey, where is your raw data? Do you know? They would ask the analyst. Is it backed up? And so during those audits, you ended up having to have either validation team members or IT team members there ready for those questions. One particular story I can provide is for the very first question, there's a picture of a recycling bin. That's tied to a real question. An auditor went and said, hey, show me the recycling bin on the computer, which was new for us, but we showed them the computer and they looked in the recycling bin and they wanted to see if anybody was attempting to delete data, to put a report in there that shouldn't have been in there. Then they would look at the physical recycling bin. They wanted to look, lab, to look at our recycling bins to see if people are printing a record and then discarding it there instead of actually submitting that data. So it was an eye-opening experience, and we had to learn that inspections are going to start changing. And so here are some examples of some 483s that we started to see come through industry. And so it's just, two examples right off the bat. I mean, it's really focused on unauthorized access to the system, and then potentially the roles that those team members had to change data. So in this particular situation, there's a shared login, right? And so they had elevated privileges. So this allowed a user to go in and they could change settings, they could modify file, they could delete data, and that was a huge red flag. They realized that the audit trail had been disabled, so you couldn't go back and see what was going on with a particular system. There weren't basic controls of that system going in and out. As you can see, there overwriting of data, deleting data, information missing from records, no dates, no signatures, information getting added to something that's not the original record. So this was huge, and when we started to see this, we realized we need to do something. We need to look at our systems because our areas could get flagged for the same thing if we're not careful. So ultimately, we decided to embark on a new journey. We decided to go full in on a DI remediation. Ultimately, DI, data integrity, is essential to the assurance of drug safety, efficacy, and quality to our products, and which our patients, customers, the product supply, our ability to operate, and our overall brand reputation is impacted by DI. Why do we do this? Some more background is, we had to build alignment with our global data integrity directives and regulations. We were setting standards at the highest level of our quality management system, and we had to make sure that our systems would be aligned. We also had to have a deeper understanding that DI spans across the entire organization. It's not just in one lab or one manufacturing area. Everybody must look at abiding by these DI rules because it impacts everybody. There was a growing number of observations, like in that example that I showed. More and more companies were getting hit with these observations. So it was key that we started to look at remediation. And then how do we approach this? Why? We needed to look at our gaps. We needed to use internal assessments to figure out what are our gaps. And we made sure we focused on data, audit trails, and then ultimately we wanted to touch our QC systems first. All right, this was going to go in. We're going in with many systems. These are 200 plus systems, and we knew it was going to be a multi-year project. So it was very critical that we all were on board with this project. And so ultimately in this picture, you'll see one house, and we realized that the business, IT, validation, and QA, we all had to start living under one house, under one quality management system, and that was the only way that we were going to get through data integrity. So to go into a little bit of our gap assessments, we had to go back to the validation basics. We had to go back to our protocols, and we had to make sure, did we assess those systems properly for electronic records? Did we utilize electronic signatures? Did we not utilize them for whatever reason in the past? And now, would it have been helpful to utilize electronic signatures? So then in certain cases, we realized, hey, we should be using an e-sig for this record instead of having to print it and sign it. Do we have the proper security measures in place? Are we controlling who has access to the systems? So we needed to dig deeper into that. We needed to look at our critical data. Do we really understand where the data is critical from the process end to end? And so we had to work with the business to understand the overall business process from the point at which you start sampling to the part that you submit the data for review. Do we understand that process? Also, how is the data being reviewed? Is this data being reviewed at the system? Is it being reviewed on paper? Is it at the source? But we really had to dig into that. And then ultimately the audit trail capabilities. Do we really understand what is an audit trail? Is a system log? Is an event log? Is a method log? Are those considered audit trails? Should we be looking at them? What's critical in those audit logs? And so that was something key that we needed to dig into. And then ultimately system procedures. Are our system procedures outlining the segregation of duties? While we set all these controls at the system during validation, is there somewhere that someone can easily find out how it was set up? What are the permissions? What are the settings? How are you building this? And so this was really important for us to evaluate. So when it comes to the process and technology evaluation, to me, I think I enjoyed this part of it, is we've already come to terms that we need to make some fixes from a DI perspective, but now it's, hey, should we change the technology? Instead of using the same technology, let's see if there's an opportunity to get something newer. And some of the typical mindset that we'd get is the very first bullet is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality. Folks were very resistant to change. So we had to end up explaining to them what the impact is to our customers and our patients. And they were reliant on legacy technology. So it was up to us to explain, hey, this new technology is going to help you, it's going to help the company. And then it was the easiest approach that I saw is that people wanted to just kind of say, hey, well, let's just keep what we have so we don't have to spend the money. We were very fortunate in our remediation is that it was a larger project and we had the capital to spend. And not all companies have that flexibility. But in our scenario, if we didn't have the funding, then some of these fixes or changes would get pushed down the road. And ultimately, people forget about it. We had to look at the business process impact. Are we doing the proper comparability studies when getting a new piece of equipment? Are we making sure that it's the right fit for us? Are we doing the proper evaluation on the routine testing? What is the impact of this new technology? Are there improvements? Are there efficiency gains? Will it take longer? I think that's the part that the business wants to know, and we had to be ready to provide that. And then the overall change implementation plan. I think that's the one thing is we can have the money and we can buy pieces of equipment. However, when we're ready to implement it, it takes time. It can be 6 months, it can be 8 months, it can be 12 months. And we have to be upfront with the business because they're going to have to provide resources to help us when it's time to implement those pieces of equipment and do the testing that's associated with it. And then one thing I'd like to mention is when changing a technology, it's really important to have multiple stakeholders involved. It doesn't help if it's just the validation team because we're focused on a subset of the compliance portion of the system. We need the SMEs, we need the area managers, we need the research team, folks that are involved with methods. We need them all to be part of the conversation to make sure we're making the right decisions. So one example is our osmometer evolution. As you can see, we had multiple models of the advanced instrument systems. You can see there's multiple ranges, and this was spread across multiple areas in QC and manufacturing. This is globally. I mean, we have these at our different international sites, and we use this for our media and buffer prep. We use osmometers for in-process solutions in manufacturing, in QC for some in-process intermediates, and they all use the same type of freezing point depression technology. However, it was important for us to know why we're using these different models. And so when we started to look at the newer technologies, these are something we needed to keep in our back pocket. So ultimately selecting the right technology. I like to focus on intended use. To me, that's key. We want to make sure whatever we buy is comparable. So are we doing the proper comparability testing to make sure we're not bringing in something that's new that has all the bells and whistles, but doesn't work the way we need it to. And so ultimately, you want to work with the vendor. We want to see, did they do any studies in-house to compare their existing platforms? Do they have white papers? Is that something that we can utilize to help us? Are we doing side-by-side testing? In our situation, we have legacy systems. and we needed to test the newer system. Do we get a demo system? In our particular scenario, we worked closely with Advanced Instruments where we sent samples to them since they had availability of legacy systems, so they could do side-by-side testing and sending us data that's associated with that, which we used to help utilize our internal testing and comparability studies. And then we had discussions internally. We said, hey, look at the data. Let's see what system works for us. How can we do this quickly? How can we do this globally? And so ultimately, we needed to make sure, what is the ease of implementation? How can we do this quickly and efficiently? Another area we look at when we're selecting a technology is, what is the system maintenance and support for a particular piece of equipment? Does that vendor have an established business? Are they in industry? Do they have other pieces of equipment around? Is there a reliable support model? Is it going to take a field service engineer 4 weeks to come on site, or are they available in 24 hours? And to me, that's really critical to look at when selecting a technology. In international presence, it doesn't help if I can only get this piece of equipment in the southern part of the United States. That's not helpful. I need this system to be available internationally. If our partners in Switzerland need to buy this piece of equipment, they need to have that same ability and access to purchase the equipment, and it being set at the same standards. And so when you select the right technology, you want to make sure you're getting the proper compliance gains. Our legacy osmometers didn't have a lot of the bells and whistles, but over time, Advanced Instruments started to have better capabilities. And so as you can see with the OsmoTECH XT, my favorite is Active Directory. It looks like they have, we have LDAP and LDAP Secure now, and this is key. This allows us to not have to do system administration locally at the system at the firma level. This way, I don't have to send somebody at 2 in the morning to help unlock a user account. It is a huge pain to do that, and I really appreciate companies that utilize Active Directory. Is the system allowing us to have secure records? With this system, it does. We can send a report file to a secure location, and it's there. And we can make sure that no one can access that other than the folks that need it. The system has audit trails, right? That's something we didn't have with some of the legacy systems. This, you can go to the system and you can look at the audit trail and you can see who ran what sample when. And that's key. You can do that at the system. You can look at the report. You can look at the audit trail that's exported. So to me, that's key. This system has electronic signature capability. So if you're in a situation where your process, you have someone that performs the testing, then you can have someone right behind them perform a verification and sign that they reviewed their data right then and there. And that's huge. Segregation of duties. This is very key. You have a segregation between an administrator and an operator. In this case, there's a supervisor, right? And the OsmoTECH XT allows us to set and configure those permissions the way that we need it. I mentioned sending a report to a LIMS location. This system has this capability, which is a huge gain. Database backup, another one of my favorites when it comes to capabilities. It's being able to send a database to a backup location so that if we ever needed to restore it in the future, it's there. If the system goes down and there's a problem, then we have backups on a daily basis so that we can restore and get our data back up to speed. And then ultimately time sync. This system has ability to connect to SMTP server. So for us, that's key that the time is right on this piece of equipment. There's not a PC. It's firmware based, but having the ability to link to our time server is key. We want to make sure that the time that's on our record is accurate. And this is a huge step in making sure that there's no drift in time. So kind of talking a little bit about data integrity 101, kind of building culture. This was key. As we moved through the remediation phase, we wanted to make sure that people understood the importance of data integrity. So one of our favorite acronyms that I'm sure all of you are aware of, ALCOA Plus, was key, and this is kind of defined throughout our training, especially in the early phases of data integrity. We brought up this acronym all the time, and so it's very important, and I think it's ingrained in all of our training. And so attributability, right? We want to make sure that the data we collect, you can identify who did it. Is it legible? Whether we're in a paper format or electronic, you want to make sure that the data is human readable, that you can see the changes throughout the retention period. Contemporaneous, right? Is the system collecting the data at the time you're recording or sampling? And that's key. Are there timestamps? Is it captured in the audit trail? Is it the original record? Can we go back to this system and confirm that this is the source data? Even if you send a report somewhere, you need to be able to identify where that source data is and where it lives. Is it accurate, right? Does this have all the information associated with the record? Does it have the necessary metadata to make sure that someone could look at it and understand where that data is coming from? And then ultimately the plus, is your data complete? Is it all the data? Is it consistent, right? Is it consistent with the results and the metadata? Enduring, right? Is it something that we can keep and pull for as long as it's needed to be retained? And then available. Can we pull this data whenever we need it? Is there a retention period in understanding this? So this was key, and we made sure that we try to live by this. And then only lastly, I kind of want to talk about establishing a collaborative relationship with a vendor. As you all know, instruments are always evolving. When we do DI remediation, we're looking at an older system and looking for ways to remediate it. If there's a new technology at that time, we try to replace it. However, we should be going back to those systems and saying, hey, are there new features? Are there new capabilities? One thing is to try to look at ways to automate functions and options, right? Is there a way to move data quickly to its final location without having these intermediate steps where require some type of intervention from a human? Are there ways of building stronger safeguards like SaaS platforms, right? We are starting to see this with certain applications where have a SaaS component where it can collect your data and be controlled. Are there third-party applications that we should be looking at where also it's a way to centralize data, maybe control access or whatnot? We are seeing this in industry. And then also, are there new options, right? AI is the new buzzword, right? Are vendors looking at ways to implement AI? Do they have internal tools? Are there platforms that they're recommending? These are the types of things that we should be looking at. We should be having these discussions. Another area is to make sure we continue to have cross-functional collaboration. To me, it's no one team can fix all DI issues. It requires everyone to monitor. Like I said earlier, my team may validate something and we set permissions and standards on that system. And once we release it into the wild, we need those MAs and the QC analysts to say, hey, what was built and configured, is it working for us? Or we have to do this workaround, or this is making my job harder. We need them to monitor that and let us know. So we always have some type of healthy conversation about our systems. And then also looking at our cybersecurity initiatives. All our companies are really deep into this because we want to protect our data, we want to protect our patents, and are there additional security measures that our cybersecurity team can provide to help us when it comes to our systems? Are there some other options for us to control our critical data? And so it's important to make sure that the cybersecurity teams that are part of our company are collaborating with us, because once again, they can push cybersecurity restriction that hurts our ability to move data, right? And so it's important to have that healthy conversation. And so in conclusion, just to kind of say, while it can be challenging to find a piece of equipment that meets both the end user needs and data integrity requirements, it is encouraging to see new products making strides in the DI space. This OsmoTECH XT, it's hitting all the buttons that we need, and it's something that's key. And I really appreciate the folks that are going behind and making these changes. So some key advice to anyone that's on this DI journey is to always try to refine the business process, right? The process doesn't always have to stay the same, right? There's always room for improvement. And at a minimum, if we can remove any basic DI traps, that's huge. 2 is to try to keep all core data integrity timelines and historical content readily available. That's the one thing I've seen is with companies, there's always transition. There's always folks that were in those positions that are no longer here or have moved on. And there's a lot of knowledge that was built during the early phases of data integrity remediation. So making sure that we have our hands on that information, those conversations, so that the new person that comes in isn't reinventing the wheel or rehashing a solution that's already been identified. And then third, my favorite, is to let's hold our instrument and equipment vendors accountable. We need to let them know. We need to provide feedback that's saying, hey, your software or your firmware needs to change. It needs to be better. I'm having problems. I won't buy your piece of equipment if you don't change X, Y, Z, right? And so to me, that's my favorite because it holds someone else accountable. Instead of us fixing problems, it's buying the piece of equipment with the solution. So ultimately, I want to thank everyone for your time and attention, and I would appreciate any questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that insightful presentation. And now I would like to invite our audience members to continue sending their questions or comments for the Q&A portion of this webinar. If you're attending via GoToWebinar, please use the questions window. And for those of you watching on LinkedIn Live events, feel free to post your questions in the comments section. I've already received some questions, so let's start off with those. Our first question here is, how did your team overcome resistance to change when introducing new data integrity protocols, especially in legacy systems?
It's a great question. I mean, I think for me, the easiest thing is probably 3 key points is communication. It's important because number 1 is to always communicate why you're making a change, right? So why is DI so important? Pretty much kind of hitting the fact that, hey, our patients, our products are impacted by this. So I think that really helps kind of push that resistance kind of away. To me, the second communication is how, right? Like, how are you going to make this work? How's it going to help them in the long run? I think that really helps, once again, to try to get them to be more open to change. And then also communicating the timeline. I think these implementation plans, everybody wants to know when you're going to do this. And so explaining, hey, I'm going to need your support for this time period. And after that, I'll be out of your face and I'll work on to the new project.
Great, thank you, Sachin. And we have another great question from an audience member. The question is, can you elaborate on how osmometers were evaluated for compliance features like audit trails, access control, and data backup?
Yeah, sure. So with, specifically with the osmometers, my team, because we get lots of requests for new equipment, what I try to do is we try to do a little bit of triage up front. And so what I do, go back to the business to say, hey, why do you need this piece of equipment? Or my team identifies, hey, we have this need. We do go back to the business or to the vendor to say, hey, can we set up kind of a pre-purchase meeting, right? So a lot of people go directly into quotes and then start the purchasing process, and that's not necessarily the case with us. We want to make a business case to our business to say, hey, we need to purchase this, and here's the information that we've received from the business. In those cases, you know, some customers are great and they'll demo their application, you know, amongst a large group of stakeholders. Sometimes they'll even send a demo piece of equipment so we actually get our hands on it. And so to me, I think that was really helpful with the OsmoTECH XT, is that we really got a feel for the system before we actually had to purchase it. And so to me, having that ability, that access to the supplier, to the vendor, to ask those questions of, hey, what do I do in this situation? Do you have an audit trail? Show me an example. That to me has been huge, and that's was specifically important with the purchasing of the OsmoTECH XT.
Yeah, and just to add to that, yeah, I think demos are a huge piece for us because we really understand the time, effort, and investment that's made for a device is never for just 1 year. It's a long-term investment. So we tend to really encourage customers to consider on-site demos, so that way they are able to have all the stakeholders together in one space to test out the device. And then for our osmometers, we also tend to provide documentation of what we tend to do on our back end from the R&D side as well as needed for testing the robustness as well as all of the features in its nuances and the outer cases, which is another key piece with data integrity. Is there's always this one case where somebody may do something differently, or which an evolving space where things are changing and you need to be made assured that we be able to keep up with it. So a lot of close engagement and collaboration in terms of making the assessment and going through the checklists, both from the vendor side as well as from the customer client side, is critical.
Great, thank you so much for that comprehensive answer. We have another interesting question from an audience member. The question is, how do you balance the need for rapid implementation with the thorough validation required for data integrity compliance?
No, it's a very, 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 very good question. Obviously, we want to take our time in the beginning. I would love to rapidly install anything quickly. It's very hard in our environment to do something really quickly. However, it's one is asking the right questions. Kind of like we said, is we're going through the process up front, asking the detailed questions. So by the time we get the piece of equipment, you know, we're ready to start our validation protocols. So one thing that we've done internally is that, you know, we build our requirements with DI requirements built in, right? And so with that up front kind of being assessed and approved and reviewed ahead of time, for us, that becomes kind of the guidance of how we do our testing, right? And so since we have built-in data integrity requirements, all the test cases associated will have that type of testing involved. And so by the time we release that first piece of equipment, that will help kind of set that timeline or that standard of, hey, it takes us this long to get one piece of equipment. And then we start working with the business on an implementation timeline. Like I said, I'd love to get 10 systems in all at once, but because the business is running at the same time, we don't want to hinder their testing capabilities. And so we end up having to kind of barter with each department, each manufacturing area, and come up with a timeline that fits their needs.
Great, thank you so much, Sachin. And another question here is, what role do vendors play in supporting long-term data integrity, and how do you hold them accountable?
I can take that. So I think Sachin spoke to this quite a bit during his presentation as well. The key piece with any equipment that comes into your labs, especially on the manufacturing side, and equipment that are involved in submissions, a critical quality measurement parameter. We really want to look at this as a relationship that's beyond at the time of purchase. So yes, it's critical to make the assessments, get the device on board, but the landscape and what we're learning from a security perspective, data integrity perspective is always changing, and there are more ways to secure your data, as well as how it connects and can effectively send the information to your infrastructure, which is also going through change. So I'd say the close collaboration, having the ability to have close contact, not just with the service engineer and technician, but other levels within the vendor account really helps. Such in, for instance, has access to product management team, to the sales team, to the applications team. So depending on the type of support you need, you're able to leverage the right support. And then the other piece as a vendor at Advanced Instruments, where we really focus on is engaging with our customers proactively and asking what they are doing, what they're seeing in their own labs, because there's always certain initiatives that they may be running, whether it be data integrity training, whether it be, for instance, such as spoke about LDAP, the Active Directory. There's a huge push to move towards Active Directory Secure. And how can we be there as one of the vendors supporting, testing that out and giving us feedback? Because we ideally want to have features which are built in a way that's easy to implement post-acquisition of the capital device. So I think as a vendor, we're really focused on making sure we're engaged with customers proactively, as well as being open to feedback as and when we get them.
Great, thank you so much. Sorry, Justin, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna add on to Shweta. No, I agree. I think it's there is an expectation that customers' voices be heard, and so I do appreciate groups like Advanced Instruments, really listening to the feedback. You really want to start benchmarking. I think that's the one thing I want to see across industry is to have more of a forum around benchmarking, because once again, you don't want to be the application that gets talked about at audits, right? Like that's what you kind of want to move away from. I think those are the types of questions I think suppliers should be asking the customer to say, what are people saying about my application? So having that open communication is really important.
Fantastic, thank you both. And we have another question coming in from an audience member. Their question is, what are some of the DI traps that Sachin mentioned?
Yeah, sure. I can give kind of just some high-level examples. So typical DI traps, what we've seen is testing into compliance, right? Like I think that's the one thing is when you have a system that doesn't have the appropriate audit trails, what result that you're writing, by hand into a batch record, how do you know that the analyst didn't run it 3 times, right? And so by not having simple capabilities like an audit trail that someone can go back and look to say, hey, this is kind of odd. Your logbook says this, but the instrument says this, right? And so those are some of the DI traps that people fall into, or we end up pushing our team members into when we don't provide these compliance features with the systems that we use.
Great, thank you, Sachin, for that answer. And another question here is, looking ahead, how do you see AI or automation influencing data integrity practices in biopharma manufacturing?
Yeah, I can start really quickly. Obviously, like I mentioned, AI is such a buzzword, and we want it to do so much more than we can do right now since it's not fully implemented. But I do see how it could help us. I know it would help me with release notes. I think just in general, every application has some sort of change, and it changes every 6 months with certain applications. And so having the ability to use AI to help kind of at least highlight, hey, what are these key differences? What are we seeing? Some type of trending analysis to me would be huge. Also, kind of to add to that is audit trails. I think that's the one thing is some audit trails are very straightforward and they're line by line and very easy to read, but there's some audit trails that are just jumbled up language, right? And so utilizing AI to kind of break through that to help us identify a trend, to me, I do see that would be a huge win for us to be able to work with AI in that direction. But we're always looking at new opportunity. I think our management has asked us, hey, what could you do with AI? It's just such a new space. So it'll be interesting to see in the future.
Yeah, and I think on our end, it's a combination of AI automation as well as understanding the level of control and security that customers are looking for in their workflow, especially manufacturing. So with our devices, for instance, a big push is to make sure the users, the operators are only doing what they're required to do on the device. They're not doing anything else beyond that. So how can we integrate the device into your manufacturing execution systems where you're sending in the sample IDs and the protocol, so the operator literally just comes to the device and does what's required and cannot do anything else, and the data goes back to the supervisor who set that test up. Can we improve that two-way communication between the device and the operating system that, or the execution system that will command the instrument? That is something that we already have rolled out on our device, but we are looking beyond that. To Sachin's point, I think really engaging with customers to understand, are there certain data integrity pieces or data sets that we should build into the equipment that can give more confidence into what the devices are able to give the customer? Like the Audit Trail example, is there something that we can do in terms of processing the information and giving an outlook and output to decision makers at various different levels in the organization? Because, you know, operators may not need the same level of AI intelligence on a device versus someone such as Sachin, who's looking at it with a very different lens. So I think understanding that and working towards it over the next few years is really where we see the value. And it's both on the artificial intelligence as well as the automation, because when you go further upstream on the biopharma workflow, you're now looking at devices such as osmometers that are testing in 96 well plate formats, higher throughput, more data. How can we automate that where it's now not an operator that's manually pipetting, manually putting the plate, manually reading the results post? So all of that automation is also something that we're really closely working with partners such as Sachin.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for those answers. We've reached the end of the Q&A portion of this webinar. If you couldn't attend your questions, the team at Advanced Instruments may follow up with you later on as well. And if you do have further questions, go ahead and quickly jot down Shweta's email. So that's on your screen now. So make sure you are jotting that down. Thank you everyone for participating in today's webinar. You will be receiving a follow-up email from XTalks with access to the recorded archive for this event. A survey window will be popping up on your screen. Your participation is appreciated as it will help us improve our webinars. Additionally, I have shared a link to view the recording of today's event in the chat box, which you can also share with your colleagues so they may register for the recording as well. For those watching via LinkedIn Live events, we encourage you to visit xtalks.com to register for this event and gain access to features such as viewing the recording and more. Now, please join us in giving a big thank you to our speakers today. That's Shweta Nair and Sachin Patel. We hope you found this webinar informative. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, Samaya. Thank you, Sachin. Thank you, everyone.